Our next standard, EE4A, states I can solve 1 and 2 step equations. So EE4A is just about solving equations. Solving equations are very much the same thing as solving a mystery. Remember that the variable in an equation represents an unknown. We can work backwards from what the equation does to a variable to figure out what it represents. So in this first video, we're going to work with a strategy called backtracking to solve for a variable. First example, if we use the equation 2n plus 7 equals 15, we can think of the story that represents the statement. So I have written here, 7 more than double a number is 15. The story is telling us what happens to the unknown. If we go back to the story, what happens to the unknown quantity, which is represented by n? 2n means that this quantity n is multiplied by 2. Plus 7 means that whatever the answer to 2 times the quantity n is, you add 7 and get 15. So that's the story. Now we're going to use backtracking to write out what happens to the variable and then undo each of the things that happens. So when you're doing backtracking, you're going to draw a box and write the variable above the box. That's an n. What is happening to n as we progress through this equation? We just talked about it. First, n is multiplied by 2, so that's this step here. Then that quantity, n times 2, you get something. Add 7 to that something, and the result is 15. I need to change colors there. Try a darker blue. The result is 15. Now, we're going to do the inverse operation of each of the steps in order. We're going to show the inverse operation on the bottom to undo what we did to the variable. So we said that the result was 15 after we added 7. So if we undo add 7, the inverse operation, or how we would undo add 7, would be to subtract 7. And 15 minus 7 is 8. So going backwards from 15, minus 7 is 8. Or before you add 7, it's 8. Now, what we have here says that n times 2 equals 8. So how do you undo times 2? Or what's the inverse of times 2? It's divided by 2. So we're going to think 8 divided by 2, and we get 4 for the value of n. In order to check our work, we need to take this 4 and then plug it back into the original equation. So we're going to write 2, instead of 2n, I'm going to write 2 times 4 plus 7 equals 15. 2 times 4 is 8, and 8 plus 7 is 15. So that value 4 for n worked in that equation. Okay, here's an even simpler example. The equation here is x plus 19 equals 21. The story is when you add 19 to an unknown number, the result is 21. So start with your x, show add 19, the result is 21. So 21 is what goes in there. How do we undo plus 19, or what's the inverse operation of plus 19? It's going to be minus 19. And 21 minus 19 is 2. So again, looking at this equation, x plus 21 or x plus 19, something plus 19 equals 21, you should be able to know that it's 2. 2 plus 19 is 21. But this is how we show the backtracking. What happened to the variable? We added 19, the result was 21. So what do we do to undo add 19? We subtract 19, and that's where we get that 2. Okay, f divided by 3 equals 11. We could use a story to represent this, like 1/3 of a number is 11, or a number divided by 3 is 11. So we start by putting our f. What happens to f? We divide it by 3. After we divide it by 3, we have a result of 11. Okay, so now we need to show the inverse operation to go backwards. If we undo divide by 3, the inverse of division is multiplication. So the inverse of divide by 3 is going to be times 3. 11 times 3 is 33. We go back and check. 33, oh, that's an ugly 3, divided by 3 is indeed 11. Okay, here's a little bit more complicated one. Start with the equation 5x minus 19 equals 26. Our story to go with this would be 19 less than 5 times a number is 26. So thinking in terms of order of operations, this one, don't think in terms of the order of the story. Think in terms of order of operations. Starting with x, what's the first thing that happens to x? Do we take 19 away first, or do we times 5 first? We times 5 first. So the first thing that happens is we multiply by 5. I'm going to change my mind. I don't want to write x5. I want to write a multiplication dot times 5. X times 5 gives you some quantity. Then the problem says take 19 away from that quantity. So the next step is minus 19. After you take 19 away, the result is 26. So now I need to backtrack or write the inverses of all the steps that I performed in the top. The inverse of minus 19, opposite of subtraction is addition, so the inverse of minus 19 is plus 19. 26 plus 19 is going to be 45. This says that x times 5 is 45. To work backwards and figure out what x by itself is, we need to undo times 5. The inverse of multiplication is division, so I'm going to undo times 5 with divided by 5. 45 divided by 5 is 9. Let's go back and plug it in to check. 5 times 9 minus 19 equals 26. 5 times 9 is 45. And 45 minus 19 is indeed 26. So we got it correct. Okay, one last equation. This is a kind of weird one. It doesn't look like any of the other ones we did, but it's still an equation. It's got a variable expression equal to some value. All right, so in order to do this one correctly, we really want to focus on what happens to the variable using order of operations. So if we start at h, order of operations is do parentheses first. So the first thing that happens to this quantity h is that you subtract 6 from it. So I'm going to write in minus 6. Change to a blue pen. After you subtract 6 from this quantity, what happens? What do you do first? Multiplication, because that's what this 2 out here means. Or addition. Do we multiply first or do we add first? PEMDAS says you're going to multiply first. So whatever this quantity is, after you do h minus 6, you get some quantity. The next thing that you do is multiply by 2. So we're going to do a little dot 2 to show our times 2. And the last thing that happens to the variable before you get to the result is that you add 1 to it. So add 1, and the answer is 9. Now we've got 1, 2, 3 steps to backtrack through. What is the inverse of add 1? Subtract 1. 9 minus 1 is 8. So that's how we go from here to here. What is the inverse of times 2? The inverse of multiplication is division, so the opposite of times 2 is divide by 2. And then we do 8 divided by 2 is 4. Okay, so now we've backtracked through 2 of the steps. The last step we need to undo is this minus 6. How are we going to undo minus 6, or what's the inverse of minus 6? Plus 6. 4 plus 6 is 10. Go back to the original problem and plug in 10, and we get 2 times 10 minus 6 plus 1. So you see what I did? Going back to the original equation, instead of an h, I wrote a 10 because that's what I solved to find. 10 minus 6 is 4. So I get 2 times 4 plus 1 equals 9. That should be equal equals 9. 2 times 4 is 8. Running out of room down here. 8 plus 1 is 9. We do know that 8 plus 1 is 9, so that means that we got it right. All right, now you're going to stop, take a quiz, and then come back and watch the video on how we solve equations without using this process of backtracking.